Hello, hello. Hi, guys. All right, so welcome to everybody. My name is Ari Wick. I am the LGBT and Allies ERG lead for the Grand Rapids, Caledonia campus. And for those of you tuning in as well in Workplace, hello, welcome. I am here today to introduce a very special guest. His name is Dr. Matthew Clark. He is an activist here as well as a psychologist in Grand Rapids. And without further ado, I think I'll pass it on over. By the way, if you guys aren't tuning in, if you haven't grabbed coffee, make sure to do so for his presentation.
Well, you just answered the question because I asked Michelle, is his name Ari or Ari? So I gave her a little head nod when you said Ari. So, well, my first knowledge of farmers insurance was when I went off to Christian college and I was in love with a long-haired artist, rebel, angry son of a preacher man. And he told me that he and his family had farmers insurance. So farmers insurance has always stayed in my brain. And when I first moved back to Michigan from New York City, I worked at Pine Rest, and I love Pine Rest, but I didn't really feel like I could do my real passion, which was to work with the LGBT community, and especially those who came from the Christian background. However, I would like to say that I think Pine Rest has come a long way just since I moved here in 2005, that they now have a support group for friends and family that's run by super LGBT-friendly clinicians, a mindfulness group. They've advertised with the Pride Center, so I think even places that at one time maybe used ECT and pray the gay therapy are now becoming more LGBT affirming. And it was interesting that when I joined the group practice, HRA, they during the interview process, they had more questions about me being Christian than being gay. So they were a little more worried about the Christian religious part than they were the gay part. So I knew that was a good sign. So I think one reason why Ari and Michelle asked me to come on board is just kind of to talk a little bit about the mental health and emotional health aspects of working in an LGBT affirming place. And even if you're not LGBT yourself, that even if you're an ally, that it can help having just an ERG here or just a climate of acceptance. That they've shown that when a place of business has a group or has taken an official stance of being LGBT affirming, the in-house bullying or even sexism or inappropriate communications, all that kind of subsides just having that group in the program and having that in the manual. So there can be benefits to even people that are not part of the LGBT community. And so I think that this is a great sign that there's things like this and things of these programs going on of education and discussion. And when I came here for a little tour, I know that people had flags on their cubicles and different pictures of their same gender spouse and things like that. And so that's all. And I got to hear about the great scores that you guys have gotten through the HRC and things like that. But I think we all know that somebody can get a perfect score on paper on something like that, and the community, the culture may not be reflective. So I hope that it's a safe place for people of all diversity and all minorities, and that people, especially from the LGBTQ community, feel affirmed and celebrated here. And unfortunately, that's not quite the case for everybody, that only 50% of LGBT employees feel safe in their workplace to be totally out. And that only 55% of heterosexual cisgender people feel comfortable, they say, working with an LGBT person. And that's statistics from 2017. So it seems like we still have a lot to go forward and a lot to do, even though Farmers seems to be on the right path with a lot of things. And I think what's also promising is that there are companies that we could probably name some of them that used to have a totally anti-gay policy that now score a really high HRC score. And that's just happened in like the last 5 to 10 years. So things are getting better in a lot of areas. Oh, I'm sorry. Human Rights Campaign. And a lot of the information I have today comes from them. If you just look at hrc.org, they do a lot of advocacy, a lot of research, a lot of education information. When you've seen on bumper stickers of the blue and the yellow stripes, square. That's what that is. And people assimilate it with the LGBT community, but they really are for human rights of all people and all minorities and diversity, but probably with an emphasis on LGBTQ. Yeah, if I ever use an acronym or something, because to tell you the truth, I just found out last week what an ERG is. I wasn't going to tell you that. But there's a great organization in town called OutPro, and our Chamber of Commerce actually is the only one in the whole country that has an LGBT professionals group right here in Grand Rapids. And we have a lot of people on staff at the Chamber of Commerce who are LGBT. And they had a panel there about making companies, whether it's big like Herman Miller or a small mom and pop store in town, of how to make them more LGBT affirming and bringing in LGBT talent and making sure that people are safe. And the woman from Spectrum was talking all about the ERG. And so I said, what is an ERG? So, and I should remember, because you guys did mention your group here, but I didn't know if you called it ERG or not. So it's things like having an ERG at a program that just adds a sense of safety and a sense of education and a sense that you belong and that you feel welcome. I mean, if you are yourself from the LGBT community, you know how it feels just to know that people accept you and that you're not in a dangerous position, and that people celebrate who you are and what you're doing in life and who you are, and you don't have to live in fear or worry or thinking that people are going to look down on you. And, you know, I mean, here in Southwest Michigan, not everybody is totally on board. Some people might think in their head a certain way, but their heart says something different. And so sometimes we come across people that aren't quite sure what they believe and who they are, but hopefully everybody is still respectful of each other and still can work together well. And I think healthy, respectful discussions such as this are key for that, even for people that may not know what they believe on the whole LGBT topic. So actually, even though there's state and county and city protections, federally we don't actually have any specific protections for ourselves in the workplace. And 25.2% of LGBT people said that they felt discrimination and experienced discrimination, and that 52.8% said that they experienced negatively impacted their work environment of feeling that they were not accepted or that they were being discriminated against in the workplace. And more than 40% of LGBT people and almost 90% of transgender people have experienced employment discrimination, harassment, or mistreatment. And that this is not only bad for LGBT workers, but it's bad for business on a whole. That there's statistical evidence that if a place is open and affirming and supportive, they're more apt to maintain talent, especially from the LGBT people, but also allies and more progressive people, and then also to bring in outside talent. I mean, I know that right after college, I escaped to Chicago and then New York City, and I think that used to be kind of a trend for Grand Rapids, that people would escape who were LGBT, but I think that that's starting to subside, and I actually know of a lot of friends and people that I work with that had gone off to a bigger city, but now have come back. And actually my family kind of kidnapped me one day, drove me all around, showed me how much things had changed in 20 years in Grand Rapids, and assured me it was not the Grand Rapids that I grew up with. So 1 in 4 employees report experiencing employment discrimination in the last 5 years, and this is much higher with transgender community. And you probably know that with all the negative things like depression, suicidality, drug and alcohol abuse, it's much higher in the LGBT community, and then it's even much higher in the transgender community. And I think that has to do with the stigma of growing up with that, and the stigma from society rather than an innate something that's wrong with us. And then these also worsen with people of color and diversity, because then you have a double or triple minority stress added onto that. And interestingly enough, the group that is the most out of the closet at the workplace is the cisgender white male. So it seems that that kind of, what do they say? Check your what at the door? Where you have a better life than other people, just privilege, yeah. So it seems like that white male cisgender privilege is prevalent even in the LGBT community and in the workplace. And then the second group that's out is also cisgender lesbians. And then the group that has the hardest time right now coming out of the closet at the workplace and the most challenges, the research shows, is the transgender community. Well, hopefully that's getting better also. And actually, there's been that's been a hot topic right now, is the whole minority and the white cisgender male privilege in a wide variety of LGBT centers. You might have read some things that popped up recently here in Grand Rapids during Pride on that topic. And I remember when I was in New York City, that was a common complaint, is that the white upwardly mobile male thought that even in the LGBT community that he ran everything and made all the decisions and choices. And it's interesting that the research shows, and I've heard a lot of my patients talk about this too, is that when somebody transitions from female to male, how life changes for them. That they say that their voice is heard more at meetings at work, more authority is given to them, more trust in what they're doing. They can say the same thing that when they would say it as a woman, they would be classified as a bad word that we all know. Whereas a male, they were just seen as being assertive. And then on the other hand, a lot of gay males say, in the research shows, and then I've also heard in my office, that they feel that a lot of cisgender heterosexual males don't have that confidence in them, that they feel that they're not going to be strong enough, or that they're weak in some area, or that they're not going to be competent enough. And so some people report that they feel that they're being not considered for promotions, or not given promotions, or not given trust for harder, more responsibilities and more leadership roles. So it's these things that many people, including women and people of color, have experienced. We also experience in the LGBT community on a variety of levels at the workplace. However, it also shows that when cultural diversity, including LGBT diversity, is recognized at a place, it can save a ton of money. It's estimated that $9 billion is saved when companies become more positive in implementing diversity and inclusion policies for LGBT coworkers. And there's also a lot of money to be tapped into. That I went to a program where it was talking about tapping into untapped markets, and the two biggest that they said were the LGBT community and the Asian community, for some reason, where those were the two least tapped into markets. And so these people that want to make all their companies rich were saying you should market to the LGBT community and to the Asian community. So then also going to a new place of employment, what a lot of people don't realize is that the LGBT person is always looking out for clues, like if there's like a little sticker or a policy, or just the way somebody might react. Like I know if I say, well, my passion is really working with the LGBT community who come from Christian backgrounds, I know that if somebody's like, oh, rather than, oh, tell me more about that. So it's like little signals, that you can pick up on. And also, I think a lot of people in the LGBT community, we throw out little breadcrumbs and see if people are going to jump on that and how they're going to react to that and if they're going to be affirming. So the typical cisgender heterosexual person may not realize that, but our radar is constantly going on. And I think too, because of past bullying and never feeling like we totally fit in society, that we might be more prone to sensitivity in that area, more prone to kind of like a hypervigilance in our area, similar to like a foster child or somebody who had been abused while growing up. And I think also that brings like a vulnerability inside of us, that something, we might take it more personally than what somebody even means it, or we might take it the wrong way. Like I was in a staff meeting once and this totally LGBT affirming guy said to me, oh, nice shoes. Did your sister get those for you? And at first I was like, really? No, he goes, oh, are those your sister's shoes? And at first I was like, oh, it felt just like when I was in high school and somebody would be like, nice sweater. Is that your sister's sweater? And at first I was like really hurt, and I realized he was just kidding. So I go, no, your lesbian sister got them for me. So, because they were boots. So then he laughed. But the old me would have been like crushed and gone home and cried in the pillow. But I think sometimes people don't realize that we still are carrying around a little bit of shame and pain inside of us. And a great book for talking about that is called The Velvet Rage. It talks about how a lot of LGBT people are carrying around this emptiness inside of them that they're trying to fill with either success or other not so adaptive things. So things to look for if you do go to a place of employment, or if you're sending somebody to Farmers, is, and I think that Farmers does have most of these covered, a written non-discrimination policy that includes LGBT. When I first moved to Grand Rapids here, I would go to cultural diversity things, and it was interesting that all the diversities were listed except LGBT. And when I was this has changed now, but when I was a preschool teacher, NACI, the National Education of Young Children, when we would go to culture, diversity, and minority things, everybody was listed, even empowering the elderly, empowering somebody who was in a wheelchair, things like that. But the LGBT, it was like the silent, like, we're not going to talk about that. That wasn't included. But now NACI recommends books like Oliver Button is a Sissy, Tango Makes Two. It's about these two, it's a true story. And we even had this here at John Ball Park, 2 male penguins raised an egg and a chick together in Central Park. So things are changing in that area too. But I think when I first moved to Grand Rapids and you would go to something on cultural diversity, everybody was listed except not gay people. But I think that's greatly changed a lot. And then looking to see if you have a resource group or an ERG, what the overall climate is, because, you know, you can't mandate or legislate someone's opinion or their attitude or thoughts or feelings, no matter what people try to do. That, because I've gone to other places, not here per se, but other places where they say, well, this is our policy in the manual, but I don't really get that feeling. I feel like my boss is just, this is just something he has to include, that I don't feel like he really is going to invite me to go golfing with the other people, or I don't feel like they would actually go to like a gay wedding or something like that, that they feel like things look on paper one way, but the general cultural feel. So I always recommend it to people, if they can, to like shadow, walk around, hang out with people in the cafeteria to see what the general feeling is towards the LGBT community. And then get to know somebody who is LGBT if you do start working there, or if you bring somebody here, introduce them to somebody who's LGBT here. Like your cellmate, which it's supposed to be your cubicle mate, that Ari gave me some recommendations, and somehow when I put together my notes, I wrote cellmate. So that was not Ari. Ari did not call it a prison. Okay, and some self-care things might be needed, like deep breathing, that if you fill your abdomen through your nose and then let it out slowly through your mouth, letting out all the CO2. So if you're in a place where you are under a lot of stress or irritable one day, you can try doing that, and that can help you throughout the day too, if you're feeling kind of edge about the LGBT topic or anything. Putting out pictures of your spouse. Another thing is just dropping off, like, I was watching Modern Family the other day, or Will and Grace, and see how people react to that. Those are little clues or tests. That's something I recommended to people when they're coming out of the closet to their friends or family, just kind of dropping those clues and see how people respond to it. And then you too can be a catalyst to help people feel accepted by putting up like an HRC or a safe space sticker, things like that. Because I know not everybody reads my website before they come to see me, but I know I've seen teenagers look and they see my safe space or different Equality Now stickers, and they know exactly that it's a safe place for them. So some benefits of coming out of the closet is you'll lead a more fulfilling life. You don't have this like dark cloud of shame around you. And in my therapy practice, and I know from my own life, is like 50% of the depression goes after you can come out of the closet. Like, not everybody might be accepting right away, and some family and friends might be rejecting, but in the long run, I think then it puts the onus on them instead of you or your friends carrying around this shadow and this cloud that adds to their depression. And I think especially here in Southwest Michigan and other conservative areas, people worry about coming out of the closet in their business area. I mean, I think so much of our lives here are culture and religion and business and companies are all intertwined. Like, I think you only see in Salt Lake City and Grand Rapids, maybe. And so I think some people are afraid to be themselves. So I think it's refreshing and wonderful that there's places like Farmers and other LGBT affirming places where people can be themselves. And then when you come out of the closet, then you can be a role model to help other people come out of the closet and just help the world become more affirming. Like, I have some friends and they say, well, it's really nobody's business. Like, other people don't walk in and say, hey, I'm heterosexual, I sleep with women, you know? But I think what we don't realize is that I respect people's privacy, that if you don't want to just throw out who you are to everybody. But sometimes what people don't realize is that can be a way to help the younger generation or to help other people that aren't sure of themselves. And I think too, what you find is that when we reveal something about ourselves, and other people feel more safe to reveal things about themselves and to be totally themselves and let themselves be vulnerable. A great TED Talk and video is by Brene Brown, who talks about the power of vulnerability, and she applies some of that at the workplace and being genuine in your place of work. Then there's a whole bunch of like benefits to the company when people come out of the closet and are LGBT affirming for the employees and for profits and for bringing in new ideas and creating an environment of safe communication and respectful dialogue. Because it's estimated that there are 7 million lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender employees in America, and not all of them are out of the closet. And the research also shows that the productivity and the bottom line for the companies would be much better if those people were allowed to come out of the closet. But the cost of alienating people is much higher, with 2 million workers have left the job who were LGBT, and they claim because they received unfair treatment and discrimination. So also it helps with recruitment, bringing in new talent, and also bringing in young progressive talent. That 83% of millennials said that they would only work at an LGBT affirming place of employment or a company. So that's good to know. And then I think going forward, like the fact that you guys had a booth at Pride, was that your first year doing that or second year? Yeah, doing things like that, just having your name out there and supporting Pride, and that people walk by and they see that you're supportive with that. That can do a lot moving forward, and that you as employees and Farmers Insurance can be an ally out there in the world. And then another thing that I saw touched on is that, is this a global company or national?
National owned by a global company.
National owned by a global, okay. Because it was saying that it can extend out of the country because certain companies are here, but then they're global, and they're global in like some really anti-LGBT areas, so that they can be used as a catalyst to help people in those like really repressive countries. So it's not just focusing on America, but you can be an extension of helping other people in other countries also, and helping to change cultural norms and policy in those areas. Some different groups that you can contact. I have a whole reference list that's on the email with a ton of websites, but different things that you can get involved in nationally are outforwork.org and reachingoutmba.org. Here in town, if you're bisexual, gay, trans male, there's a great group called G Summit. It's a social group, and there's probably about 150 members. And when I was in charge of the event, my sister made a whole cool outdoor Martha Stewart party, and then we all went to see the Book of Mormon. And the next one I'm doing is the Peter Pan play. But we do plays, ballet, book conversations, volleyball, different events like that. And then OutPro, the Pride Center has a ton of different groups. The Gays in Faith Together, or GIFT, has a support group called GRIT. So there's a lot here, even in our community, that people can get involved in for support, or for just to make other friends who are LGBT and allies. Oh, and if somebody remains in the closet at work, they're 73% more likely to leave that company. So even just getting, but not pushing somebody, but making it an environment where people feel safe to come out of the closet can help the person stay and not leave the organization. I mean, because I love Pine Rust, but that's basically why I left Pine Rust, is I didn't feel like it was an LGBT affirming place for me. Except before I joined them, I lived on a lake with my sister and hung out with her and her friends all summer, and I was very gay all summer. And then her best friend's mother happened to be the office manager, so it was obvious, who also went to my little Bible church with my grandma. So she knew I was gay, and so she would always funnel all the transgender and gay people my way without actually saying, well, we do have a gay therapist, but they always ended up in my office, which was good. But I was really surprised when I saw her behind the desk my first day. But see, that's that fear base that can get triggered in you, because I had just come out of the closet to my family, but I wasn't out of the closet at Pine Rust. And I think now, if I was at Pine Rust, I'd probably have the motive that this is who I am. If you want me to work here, you're going to have to accept that. If not, then I'll leave. But I wasn't at a place in that time. I think because I had just gotten the doctorate and finished a program, so I was kind of desperate for a real job. And at that time, Pine Rest kind of had a monopoly on places that were hiring. Oh, and I think what's cool too is a lot of the top executives like Cook from Apple that are coming out. A guy from Microsoft, McGowan, came out and did a whole video webinar for his employees on the power of coming out and how the Microsoft is supportive of the LGBT community. And then a leading consultant on corporate diversity, he went to all these companies that had almost a perfect score, and he asked them that was great, but then he asked them that why is it that only 2 people out of the 800 had yet to identify themselves as gay in an affirming 4-hour program on gay and transgender issues? If it's so safe, where are they? He was asking. So he did some research and consulting about how even people at places like Farmers that have a positive HRC score are still, for some reason, afraid to come out of the closet. And then also they did some research showing that some LGBT people and transgender people feel invisible. They feel that they're not included, and they're not kind of included in the reindeer games. And when I lived in Ireland, I felt that way too. I felt like all the straight heterosexual guys would hang out, and then they would all go to the club, try to pick up girls, drink with girls, and I would walk by and there was like no inclusion. And I don't think that they were consciously, I was out as gay then, but I don't think that they consciously were like, oh, we don't want to hang out with him. But I didn't fit their norm or what they were expecting. But instead of just being depressed, I went out to the gay bars. I ended up meeting the university's son and dated him all summer and just had a wonderful time. But there was one funny thing is, oh geez, I hope my mom's not watching this. But one morning he snuck me out. I won't say what room we were in. He snuck me out the back door into the alley, and he yelled up to his parents, "Oh, I'm just taking out the rubbish." And I was like, okay, so yeah, verbal and nonverbal cues. And then if somebody is cisgender heterosexual, don't assume that somebody has a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Because I mean, I had that when I started therapy as a kid. So are you dating a girl? When are you going to get married? It's like this assumed heterosexuality that even therapists did when I myself was in therapy as a college kid. But then also not assuming that somebody's gay. Like sometimes I'll think to myself, oh, the guy's so gay. And then I'm like, why am I assuming that he's gay? Just because there's like this stereotype. He's married with kids. I shouldn't just assume that he's gay, even though in Grand Rapids there are quite a few people that fit that category. But I think sometimes we assume, or we try to pull people out of the closet before they're ready, and that's not good for their mental health either. So I think also if people in supervision can, in trying to use the correct pronoun. I mean, I know people from my generation, I find it so hard to use the pronoun they, because I had a grandma that was always like correcting me on all English, including not using they for singular. But then I had a trans female in my office. She brought in literature and showed me that in Old English, they actually was both singular and plural. It's just our American westernized English that we've forced that onto kids that it's singular. But certain things are hard to change, but I think people really appreciate it if we try to use the right gender or the correct name and things like that. And I was just listening to Laverne Cox yesterday talking about how in the transgender community, people of a higher SES have an advantage. Like I have somebody in my office who is on a certain insurance company's Medicaid, and they just banned that they're not going to pay for surgeries anymore. So they're going from that it would have been covered to now it's like around $30,000 to get the full surgery. And so what Laverne Cox was saying in the transgender community, somebody from a high SES, and she talked respectfully, but realistically talked about Caitlyn Jenner. You know, I mean, a multimillionaire, the next day she can have everything done and wearing a Gucci dress and all that. And not everybody in the transgender community has that advantage. Luckily, in my office, most of the insurance companies pay for the hormone treatment. They just pay for the copay or just small fees. So that seems to be very easily done, but the surgery seemed to be an astronomical fee for a lot of people. And also just, it's very expensive to transition in certain ways. A lot of things have to be bought or used, and it's not always inexpensive for people to do. But I think that there is hope, that even though things might seem that they've regressed in some ways, that I think that there is hope, because 89% of such companies include sexual orientation and 66 prohibit discrimination based on gender identity. Of the largest 50 federal contractors, 86% prohibit sexual orientation discrimination and 61% prohibit discrimination based on gender identity. And that some companies who 25 years ago banned gay employees now top the Workplace Equality Index in 2016. So I think things are getting better. But I think we too have to not get relaxed, because I think in some ways we got relaxed and assumed that things were just going to keep getting better. And then there was a little bit of awakening. And so I think we have to keep being advocates and keep being supportive and keep holding supervisors and each other and ourselves accountable, and to be out there for each other, to be support for each other, whether we're LGBT or not, but just be supportive of each other, and also using self-care, because I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in work or taking care of other people that we forget to do self-care for ourselves, and that's really important. So yeah, the vast majority, 89% of Fortune 500 companies prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. 2/3 prohibit discrimination based on gender identity. The majority, 66%, provide domestic partner health insurance benefits to their employees. So things do seem to keep getting better. And that's interesting with marriage equality. I had a lot of people in my office who lost insurance. Their partner or boyfriend or girlfriend no longer has insurance because the company said, well, now that marriage is legal, we're not going to insure your live-in partner, that they have to be married, and they weren't quite ready to get married, and so their partner doesn't have insurance anymore. So I just wanted to end with a quote. When I mentioned John Galligan of Microsoft, he said that he's the director of governmental affairs with Microsoft, and he had been silent in the closet for years. And now he's out and proud and an advocate and tries to strengthen other people in the company to be allies and to be out themselves. He said, being out and proud is a call to action. Everyone can make a contribution, even if that contribution is to be yourself and use whatever influence you have to make the world and workplace more inclusive, more diverse, and more welcoming for everyone. So I like that quote. I think that's a good thought. That's it.
I feel very official now. Thank you. So in terms of the discrimination policies, you were mentioning that like Farmers has one and other companies. So however, there's not a federal discrimination policy, and some states don't have them. So how does that work if you live in a state where, or like if you live in Michigan and your employer does not have a policy versus Farmers? Like, what does that look like? Since Farmers has a policy, but federally they don't.
Yeah, because in 2017, 28 states did not have protections for LGB, and 30 did not have protections for transgender. But I don't know how that works. If I had to take a guess, I would suspect that you're protected in these walls, but maybe not protected in the court system officially at a state level. That would be my guess, but I'm not an expert in that area. Sorry.
I would refer to the ACLU. They have an actual page.
Would you like?
Yeah, ACLU.org and then Lambda Legal. There's lots of advice on there.
So we have a question that was submitted ahead of time. I often find that I distance myself from people that have differing opinions on the LGBT community, particularly on social media, as it can be difficult to hear criticism about who you are as an individual, and those conversations can get heated quickly. On the other hand, I sometimes feel obligated to defend myself and others who identify as LGBT. Do you recommend engaging in that discussion or separating yourself from the negativity?
I think that would be at a personal level and what's good for you and what's best for your mental health. I actually don't engage in arguing. And one of my favorite authors who originated in this area and started a mega church, I won't mention his name, but he had said that once, of not getting engaged in like the arguing and the conversations in social media on different topics. And when I implemented that in my life, I felt a huge stress just leave. But then I also see friends of mine who do engage in a healthy, polite, respectful way on the internet, and they don't seem to be bothered by it. I guess I would say you have to look at your own mental health and your own emotional health and see what's best for you. I think that on those social media platforms, there can be a lot of negativity and hostile, and it doesn't seem to be a very respectful conversation. If you look at Colossian Forum here in town, if you go to their website, I think it's colossianforum.org, but if you just Google it, they have these great recommendations on how to have a respectful conversation and dialogue on heated topics where people may not agree with you. I've participated in ones on like ecology, climate change, evolution, homosexuality, and they're here in town, and they've got great guidance on how to have respectful conversations on hot topics.
Yeah. I've been with the company a really long time, and this is just actually a comment. 29 years, and spent 20 of those years in Los Angeles in LA home office. And I will tell you the progression of this company, tolerance, inclusion, diversity, the whole 9 yards, has been tremendous. And it has been a journey, there is no doubt. I will just share, without naming names or saying who, probably wouldn't know them anyway, but we had people at the executive level, at many levels, who were in the closet for years and felt that it was not a safe place to come out. And that was a long time ago. And now I know we have just the opposite, people that are out and very proud, bring their spouses to events, they're of the same gender. So I'm just very proud of how far this company has come. And this is a really good place to work. So
awesome. That's great. And then I think other people feel like they can just be themselves and be accepted and supported. And I think some people don't realize how much stress those people that are in the closet are really going under. And you create like this paranoia in your mind. Like you read into messages, or you think people are watching you, or you're constantly trying to pretend to be somebody you're not. And it's so freeing when you can just be yourself, and to know that people like Michelle are going to just accept you and celebrate you for who you are. Not Ari, though. He won't, but he's very judgmental. Yeah, in his cell.
So not to bring the town down, but if you're concerned that maybe being out is something that has held you back and you're not really sure how to address it, what would you recommend the most tactful way? I know that we have phone numbers in place here that if you're afraid of something, you can call the ethics hotline. But what would you recommend for someone who's afraid of that?
Who's afraid of retaliation for being out, or
were passed over on a job because they are?
Okay, yeah. I think talking to somebody who is LGBT or an ally here at the workplace confidentially, and kind of getting their feedback on it and dropping it to them and having a discussion about it. And then maybe I would think of a LGBT affirming person of authority and hierarchy and try to have a confidential conversation with them and get some advice from them. And then talk to your HR department. And maybe this person has a track record and already a paper trail of that kind of behavior.
Thanks. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Oh, sorry.
All right. I do have one kind of a comment question. I think one of our greatest challenges with the LGBT community right now that marriage equality has happened, and of course we're working on adoption, of course, and like giving blood, for instance, most people don't know there's that discrimination there as well. But I think is apathy. I cannot believe the amount of people that I have met that not necessarily here at Farmers, but just out and about that just are kind of apathetic, like, yeah, okay, whatever, it is what it is. And, it's not an issue now, right? Well,
Right.
how do we energize people to, I find myself trying to share my own story and my own struggles and, the struggles of my friends and that, try to show that, the empowering journey that they've had, but yet at the same time, I'm not sure that's enough.
Right.
And I'm always at a struggle for what to do. So do you have any suggestions on what we could do to, encourage not just our base, but just people in general about LGBT issues?
Well, I think twofold answer with that. I think that we got kind of complacent on certain issues because we thought that we were on this trajectory of things just getting better and better. And then there was a rude awakening and not everybody had that same preference for how things were changing. And misinformation, I think especially around the transgender topic with bathrooms and things, there's been a lot of misinformation out there, like being correlated with pedophilia or people pretending to be transgender to take opportunity of other people. So I think it's false information that's been out there too, to kind of dissuade people that might have been more neutral or just uninformed that now are misinformed. But I think too, I find in my office, a lot of people are just like kind of giving up when it comes to like certain topics, and that people are just kind of getting burned out right now and just are like, I'd rather just focus on my family and not think about it. But I think that can be dangerous too, that I think that we have to be activists or something. Very damaging things can take place if we're not. And I think on the LGBT topic, I think with things like it being so in the media and so where it's so accepted in the entertainment world or what we see on social media, that then we assume that it's everything's all done and that the fight for equality is over when it's definitely not. So I think that sometimes we live in a false reality by watching certain things in the entertainment world, which may not actually be a reflection of our true society and where things are. And I think too, just bringing together people to have respectful dialogue, because I think like if somebody can actually meet an LGBT person or get to know somebody or have somebody in your family who's LGBT, that's much different than if you're just a statistic or if you're just reading something that is anti-gay or paranoia on certain topics, that if you can actually meet somebody and have a conversation with them. And that one thing I think is really changing for people is when they realize that this wasn't a choice, that nobody chooses to be LGBT, and that in certain communities, nobody would choose that. So I think certain information like that we can share with people can be very enlightening and cause change and growth for them. And with that said, millennials are the lowest number to vote, and yet they're the most LGBT affirming group out there. So we have to spark them to get to the voting stations.
Let's talk about cellmates. So I kind of how it works with a lot of folks coming into the company, they might be in the call center environment. And we are often paired with, a team of people. Usually it's a small number of people, somewhere between, maybe it's 5 to 12. And then maybe that team, of course, joins another team, part of a greater team. But nevertheless, we are always situated in that arranged marriage with our, cube mate or whoever that is. And I found myself on a couple of occasions in the past 2 years that I've been with the company where I'm not quite sure at first how to navigate that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard you earlier mention something about, like giving little breadcrumbs, little things, I've done that before, varying the size of the breadcrumbs, saying, oh yeah, hey, my spouse and I went here, maybe, using gender neutral terms, whenever possible. But I guess I feel like that maybe is not necessarily enough. Maybe do you have any other suggestions for people who are maybe just getting on the floor and, are maybe a little apprehensive to just totally out themselves?
Right.
Maybe what other methods could we use that there might be to, I don't know, establish ourselves and kind of feel out where friendly territory is?
Right. Well, I always recommend to people to throw out those breadcrumbs and little messages like, I'm going to gay pride, or my friend who is gay. But myself, I just tell people right away. I let people know right away, because I think I lived so many years just in the closet and in that depressed spot of hiding and shame and worrying, that now I'm just like, I'm going to let you know right away, and then I'm going to see your reaction and how you react to that. Because then I feel like, for one, it empowers me, and then I get to know right away more of what the person's thinking and feeling. And not everybody's going to be totally honest. Some people, they may act one way to your face and behind the back think a different thing. But at least I feel like then you're in a place of empowerment when you're just yourself and you try to have an attitude that you don't care, and that this is who you are, and that you're standing up for yourself. That's what I do. But then other people who may not be in that position, especially if somebody comes in new and they're just starting and they have to be stuck with that person, then maybe I would just give out little signals and see how they pick up on it and how they react.
So something you said just sparked a question in my mind, and that is, do you feel like there are some things that as a gay person you could do to educate a straight person who has maybe been in West Michigan for a long time and doesn't understand or doesn't get it or feels uncomfortable or doesn't know how to react when you say, hey, I'm gay and I'm your new cellmate?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it here in Southwest Michigan is based on taking the Bible at a literal traditional view. And so a lot of my work is educating people, and a book that helped save my life was What the Bible Really Says About Homosexuality. And then David, his last name is Vines, and he has the Reformation Project that has a whole bunch of information on how the Bible's been mistranslated. Like, the word homosexual wasn't even in the Bible till 1946. And you can go through all the scholarly information about what those verses really mean. So I think a lot of people here in Southwest Michigan, without trying to force your beliefs on them, but if you can give them alternative information on those verses, that can help them a lot. And I think also letting them know that there are people out there who are LGBT and spiritual or Christian or Jewish or Muslim, whatever their belief system is, that can be really eye-opening for them, and that there are affirming organizations in their religion or in their denomination can be really changing for them. Because some people don't know that you can be both gay and Christian, or gay and Muslim, or gay and Orthodox Judaism, things like that, or more conservative. I'm not a Judaism expert, so I might be using the wrong term, but I mean like conservative, ultra-conservative Judaism.
Oh, the microphone again. It's me again. Ari, what you were saying earlier about like the breadcrumbs, I never thought about it as a breadcrumb trail, but I totally followed a trail one time. I was new at a cube upstairs on the 3rd floor, and I was like, I don't know anybody on this team. And then I saw one of the ERG flyers on somebody's desk. And I was like, oh, maybe she's gay. And she's straight, but she's the best. Right. And she ended up being one of my really good friends, because I saw her desk. I was like, I'll talk to her then. And then I sat next to her, and I was super happy because I felt way more comfortable. Yeah. And like just that piece of paper made a difference to me. And so I think having like even the smallest little thing at your desk can like as a gay person or not,
Yeah, for
could
sure.
could be like really supportive. But it worked for me, so
Yep.
love
Yeah. And people don't realize how healing and how cool that can be when you see something like that.
Yeah.
The allies are doing more just, I mean, it reminds me of like old fashioned Christianity that we were always supposed to be witnessing to people. Well, allies are a great witness out there. They're there helping to heal and support and to help us. And we need them. Like a good friend of mine, I developed a friendship with her because I just saw she's cisgender, heterosexual, but she was just wearing a red ribbon one day. And so I was like, oh, you can't be too anti-gay if you're wearing a red ribbon all around Grand Rapids.
I have a question for you regarding depression and suicidality. And this is not necessarily, it's not, exclusive to the LGBT community. I feel like in the workplace, there is not necessarily a lot of information, or it's not readily talked about. And I think that I feel like that's very prevalent, that there is a depression and issues with suicidality here. And, just from the conversations I've had with other people. And I feel like I wish there was a way that we could, have these conversations with our supervisors or, with our leadership in a way that would, maybe we could get some sort of an education program or something just to make people more aware, conscientious. I think that might be one area where we, I think, as a company could grow, especially considering, the stuff that you've said already with the heightened risk that the LGBT community is at for these.
And I think that's what's great about companies that have like an employee assistance program or FMLA that people can go on if they're feeling that depressed, that they're suicidal, or panic attacks, that they can't go to work. But then I think also people in minority groups, including LGBT, then they feel less likely to use those, because then it's another vulnerability, or they might be seen as weak, that not only am I gay, but I'm also like suicidally depressed. So then they worry about people doubting their mental stability. So I think that if we could just let people know that we know lots of people are out there hurting and going through stress and feeling suicidal. I mean, there's been so many suicides just recently of people that are economically super successful that have committed suicide or overdosed on something. I mean, that's one thing working in psychology has taught me. Like, you will think somebody is totally successful, totally confident and happy, and then when they're in your office, you find out they're just like everybody else, that they're depressed, they're hurting, they're struggling with something, or they had some kind of abuse as a child. And I think just having a workplace be safe, that you can admit that you might be struggling with anxiety, with depression, doesn't mean that you're going to be a less effective employee or not as much of a gain for the company. So I guess creating like a safe environment like that. I don't know. What do you think the company could do to make it safer environment for people that are struggling emotionally?
Yeah, no, I did. I know we have resources here. Did you want to maybe talk more on that?
Did you have something specific you were thinking, Michelle?
No, I was just going to reiterate that we do have an employee assistance program. You're allotted 5 visits? Yeah. Right. And even Jessica Galusha, our wellness specialist, she is putting a very big focus on mental health right now. We're trying to make it, I think, more prominent. When we talk about wellness, we always think about eating healthy and physical fitness, but we have kind of shifted in that direction. So I don't know if you have anything to add.
Great. I made a note to myself. I don't think I need the mic, but I'll take it. I made a note to myself to talk to Jessica, because I think that there are some things that we can put out there about mental health and suicide awareness. And I've seen some of that stuff on the ERG sites as well, like DIG. And I don't know if I've seen anything on the LGBT website, but I know DIG put out a really interesting video about things that people are struggling with. And, just being aware that when you meet a person, you don't know the whole story. So being kind and being accepting and non-judgmental and all those inclusive and all those things is important. But we can definitely get that message out there in many ways and continue to reinforce it.
And what's great about the employee assistance program, sometimes then it'll get somebody in the door to connect with a therapist, and they can just use their insurance to continue doing therapy. Whereas if they didn't have that, they might have been like, oh, I don't want to try therapy or do therapy.
Just one other comment in regards to the EAP. Fantastic resource. And one of the other reasons it's there is for people's privacy. They may not want to talk to their leader about it. They may not want to come out. That's their, whatever is going on in their world, we want to respect their privacy, which is one of the reasons we have those resources, not only for the help, but also you don't have to mention anything you don't want to mention.
So how did this start? How did you guys start doing these? Yeah.
So that was something that being Pride Month, we decided to take that opportunity to have something that be campus-wide, and even because we couldn't provide from our workplace, maybe something that the entire employee population could come to. But really, I think for our group, it's just something new that we tried this year, and I feel like it's gone really well so far. I think even the conversation today I know it's given me some ideas. I'm sure when I talk with the team, we'll have more ideas about what we can expand upon next year and be ready for. But really, I think our objective with it was just to get some conversations started, get people talking about the fact that they might be a little intimidated by or not know what it means to be an ally. Right. And also just getting the conversation about some of the fears that people that are part of the LGBT community do have when it comes to, because I think a lot of us assume that those fears are not present today.
Right.
And so if you have an ally or just a general member of the employee base who's not really thinking too much about it or doesn't think it's a big issue, I think it is just a nice opportunity for us to remind everybody that, yes, it really is an issue, mm-hmm. and just getting the conversation started. So something new that we tried, and, we'll see how it goes here going forward.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you
thank
so
you.
much for
Appreciate
coming. We really appreciate it. Cool. Thanks all for watching and coming. Please take more snacks with you. We have flags if you would like one. And we are doing a second run of shirts if anyone is interested for the Take Grand Rapids Pride. So
there's t-shirts?
Yes, they say farmers on the front and then Grand Rapids
Oh,
Pride.
cool. How can I get one? Oh, I need it in gay small. But when I went to Israel, they were handing out t-shirts, and the lady was trying to take me a medium, and this friend of mine whose brother works at AK Rick, she goes, "Oh no, honey, he's gonna need a gay small."
We have extra small.
I'll take a men's small. That's good.
So this is our last event here on campus, and I think we saved the best for last, but I might be biased. So thank you all for coming. Did you pay her to say
that? Wait, I watched the video with Larry. You said he was the best.
I didn't talk in that video. So thank you.
Cool, thank you.
And have a great day, guys.